AITA for refusing to babysit my sister's child after she unexpectedly moved in with me. She thinks that it's a good experience for me. I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but I genuinely need to get this off my chest. My sister, who is 21 years old, gave birth to her first baby almost 2 months ago. I'm 26 and, although I work with kids professionally and have a lot of experience taking care of them, I don't have children of my own, and I'm very clear that I don't want any either. That has always been my stance. I love kids, but I've never had the desire to be a parent. And that's never been a secret. When my sister got pregnant, I had my reservations. It was a planned pregnancy, but she barely knew the guy she was having a baby with. They met, got serious extremely fast, and within a few months, she was pregnant and moving in with him. I remember sitting her down and telling her, very calmly, very respectfully, that a baby is a lot of work. That being sleep-deprived and emotionally overwhelmed is not just something you can brush off. That even with a partner, parenting can feel isolating, exhausting, and relentless. I also made it very clear, as kindly as I could, that although I have a flexible job and experience with kids, I was not going to be her built-in babysitter. I didn't want her assuming that just because I love her and love kids that I'd automatically step into that role. She brushed off my concerns and said she and her partner had talked about it all and were prepared. I let it go. It was her decision, and she seemed confident. Fast forward to the birth. I dropped everything to be there for her. I stayed with her in the hospital, helped with paperwork, talked to the nurses, advocated for her when she was too tired to speak up, and held her hand through so many tears and moments of anxiety. I didn't mind. I knew that childbirth is hard, recovering from it is even harder, and I wanted to be there for her while she found her footing. For the first few weeks after she got home, I was at her place constantly. I brought meals, helped with feedings and diaper changes, and let her take naps while I looked after the baby. I never complained. She needed me, and I showed up. Then, something happened that completely caught me off guard. One afternoon, she texted and said she wanted to come over. I assumed she was just visiting, maybe wanted a change of scenery or needed a break. That was totally fine. I tidied up the apartment, cleared some space for her diaper bag, and waited. She arrived not with just a diaper bag, but with bags and boxes and baby gear. A bassinet. A baby swing. Blankets. Bottles. Toys. Her clothes. The baby's clothes. It quickly became obvious that she wasn't just visiting, she was moving in. I stood there stunned while she said that her partner, my brother-in-law, had to sleep during the day because he works nights, and she didn't want to keep the baby in the house and risk disturbing his rest. She said it would be easier for everyone if she just stayed with me for a while. I didn't even know how to respond. I hadn't agreed to this. She hadn't even asked me. She just made a decision and showed up with her entire nursery. And for a while, I tried to make it work. I genuinely did. I figured she was exhausted, maybe postpartum hormones were playing a role, and this wasn't the time to argue. I rearranged my space, gave her the bedroom while I slept on the couch, and tried to maintain some kind of balance while still working full-time and managing my own commitments. But very quickly, things got out of hand. I became the primary caregiver, without ever agreeing to be. Feedings. Me. Diaper changes. Me. Soothing the baby through colic, sleepless nights, teething discomfort. Me. All of it fell on me, while my sister either slept, scrolled through her phone, or took long showers to relax. Meanwhile, her partner continued his night shifts and slept undisturbed in their apartment while I, someone who never chose to be a mother, was pulling night duty and surviving on 2 or 3 hours of sleep a night. And what made it worse was that my sister acted like this was natural. Like this was exactly what she expected of me. She kept saying things like, well, you know what you're doing, and, I'm still recovering, you're better at this than I am. I tried to remind her, gently at first, that I have a job, that I still have deadlines, meetings, responsibilities, and my own life to take care of. But that didn't seem to register. If I said I needed a night off, she'd look at me like I was being selfish. If I mentioned how little sleep I was getting, she'd say, welcome to parenthood, as if I had signed up for this. But I didn't. I was never asked. I was just expected to step in and take over. The final straw came when I told her I needed to scale back and start setting firmer boundaries. I told her, calmly but clearly, that I couldn't continue being her full-time support system without sacrificing my own well-being. I wasn't angry. I wasn't yelling. I just said that this situation wasn't sustainable, and that while I still wanted to help, I couldn't keep doing everything. I told her it was time for her to return home, work things out with her partner, and find a routine that didn't rely on me burning myself out. She didn't take it well. She accused me of abandoning her, of being cold and ungrateful, of not caring about her or the baby. She cried, told me I was being cruel, and said she couldn't believe I was choosing sleep and free time over family. She said I had no heart and that she didn't know how she would manage without me. And the truth is, I felt awful. I still do. I don't want to hurt her. I know she's overwhelmed, scared, and unsure of herself as a new mom. But I cannot be the person who holds everything together while sacrificing my own health and sanity. This isn't what I signed up for. I agreed to be a supportive sister, not a third parent. I feel like she and her partner planned this baby without actually planning for the reality of raising one. And instead of figuring it out together, they defaulted to the most convenient backup plan, me. Now that I'm enforcing boundaries, I'm being painted as the villain. My sister barely speaks to me. My brother-in-law hasn't reached out at all. I keep asking myself if I'm wrong, if I'm heartless, if I should have just kept going a little longer. But then I remember the sleepless nights, the unspoken expectations, the feeling of being trapped in a role I never wanted. And I don't think it's wrong to say no when the cost of saying yes is losing yourself entirely. So, am I the bad person for refusing to keep being my sister's full-time caregiver? For setting boundaries and wanting my life back? Because from where I'm standing, it feels like I was always meant to be the safety net, and no one even had the decency to ask. Update 1. It had only been a week since I finally sat down with my sister and set the boundaries that had been building inside me like a dam about to burst. I had told her that I couldn't keep doing everything, that while I love her and want to help, this wasn't sustainable, and she needed to return home and start parenting alongside the man she had chosen to have a child with. I expected tension. I expected disappointment. But I did not expect what came next. She didn't leave. She didn't even acknowledge the boundaries I set beyond an initial storm of tears and guilt-tripping. Instead, she kept acting like nothing had changed. She continued taking long naps, continued handing the baby off to me the moment he whimpered, continued acting as if my apartment was her permanent home. I was exhausted, mentally, physically, emotionally. But I was also gathering strength. I was done being railroaded into a situation I never agreed to. I was preparing to ask her to leave officially, no more warnings, no more softly patted hints. And then she dropped something new on me, something that felt rehearsed, like it had been sitting in her back pocket, waiting for the right moment to be used. She said the baby was experiencing severe separation anxiety. That he cried when anyone else picked him up, that he wouldn't sleep unless I was the one rocking him, that only my presence made him feel safe. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "He doesn't get stressed when he's with you. You're the only one who doesn't cause him stress." I froze. It wasn't just what she said. It was how she said it, slow, deliberate, like she had been practicing it in front of a mirror. She used psychological terms so fluidly, so naturally, as if she had just walked out of a therapist's office. It didn't sound like a struggling young mom overwhelmed by the chaos of new motherhood. It sounded like manipulation dressed up in concern for her child. And it worked, momentarily. I felt a surge of guilt, as if kicking her out would be damaging the baby emotionally. As if I would be doing harm by removing the only safe space he had. But it didn't sit right with me. This baby, while occasionally fussy, was generally happy, well-fed, and quick to smile. He cooed at strangers and had never once refused to be held by someone else in front of me. I had a gut feeling something was off. That same evening, while my sister went out for a walk for fresh air, which had become her new nightly ritual that stretched for hours while I stayed back on baby duty, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called the pediatrician. Her baby bag was wide open on the floor, and I had seen the pediatrician's card sticking out of the folder days earlier. I dialed, asked to speak to a nurse, and explained who I was and why I was calling. The nurse was kind but firm. She said there were no notes indicating any behavioral or emotional concerns. No excessive crying. No signs of distress. In fact, during their last appointment, the doctor had encouraged my sister to start letting other people hold the baby more frequently, to let him adjust, not shelter him. The words hit me like a thunderclap. She wasn't just overwhelmed. She was lying. Lying to keep me tied down. Lying to keep the arrangement going, no matter how much it drained me. And worst of all, she was using her baby as a tool to do it. That was the moment I knew I was done. The next morning, I woke up early, before the baby stirred, before my sister emerged from the bedroom, and I sat at the kitchen table and wrote a letter. Just a few short paragraphs. Calm, direct, no dramatics. I told her that I loved her, that I would always care about her and her child, but that this was not a healthy arrangement. That I had never agreed to this level of responsibility and had given more than I had to give. I reminded her that she had a home, a partner, and other options, and that it was time for her to return to them. At the end of the note, I gave her a firm deadline, the end of the week. That gave her 5 days to arrange her things, talk to her partner, figure it out. But one way or another, this chapter was ending. I left the letter in the center of the kitchen table, where I knew she'd see it. I didn't hover. I went to work that day like usual and let the silence speak for itself. What followed was an explosion. That evening, I walked in the door to the sound of her crying. Not quiet, not mournful, but loud, performative sobs, the kind that feel engineered to draw attention. She was pacing back and forth in the living room with the baby in one arm and her phone in the other, already on a call with our mother. As soon as I stepped in, she launched into a tirade about how I was kicking a new mother out, how I had no compassion, how she couldn't believe her own sister could be so cold. I didn't respond. I walked to the bedroom, shut the door, and let her scream. Over the next few days, it only escalated. She slammed cupboards, talked loudly on the phone about me within earshot, and kept repeating that she didn't know where she would go, that I was putting her in danger, that I didn't care about my nephew. My mom called me too, more than once, and while she didn't outright attack me, her voice was laced with guilt. She asked me if I could just hold on a little longer, and said things like, "Your sister is just struggling right now." I told her, firmly, that I had already held on far longer than I should have, and that loving someone doesn't mean allowing them to take advantage of you. Each night leading up to the deadline, my sister tried a new tactic. One night, it was silence and sadness. Another, it was passive-aggressive comments about how the baby doesn't understand why his safe place is being taken away. Once, she left a pacifier on my pillow, like it was some sort of guilt-laden offering. But I stood my ground. I didn't engage in fights. I didn't justify myself. I gave her the deadline and stuck to it. On the 5th day, she left. She packed everything with theatrical slowness, pausing every few minutes to sigh loudly or sit and cry. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't thank me. She didn't acknowledge what I had done for her over the past 2 months. She just left, baby in tow, and slammed the door on her way out. I stood in the kitchen, listening to the silence that followed, and for the first time in weeks, I exhaled without the weight of expectation crushing my chest. The apartment felt eerily quiet. The kind of quiet that initially feels wrong, like something's missing, but slowly starts to feel like freedom. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel heartless. I felt like someone who had been forced into a role she never wanted, finally reclaiming her own life. She's still upset. I know because the messages haven't stopped. Some are angry, some are pleading, some are guilt-ridden. But I haven't responded. I don't owe her more than I've already given. She made choices. I made boundaries. And I didn't break down. Update 2. By the time the day arrived, the day she was supposed to move out, I had already cycled through every possible emotion. I was ready. I had given her a full week's notice, I had made myself crystal clear, and I had stuck to my boundaries without faltering. The emotional theatrics, the guilt trips, the phone calls from my mother trying to mediate, none of it had swayed me. I was drained, but I was firm. This was the final day, and I was prepared to reclaim my space and my peace. What I wasn't prepared for was her next move. That morning, she emerged from the bedroom with a strange smile on her face. She looked unusually composed, almost cheerful. She was carrying a box wrapped in soft pink paper and topped with a bow. It looked like a birthday gift, and for a moment, I was caught off guard. She handed it to me with a tone that felt almost rehearsed and said, "This is your chance to become more experienced in raising children." I froze. My brain couldn't quite process what was happening. This wasn't a goodbye. It was something else entirely. I opened the box slowly, half expecting to find baby clothes or a thank you note. Instead, I found an envelope and a neatly folded sheet of paper. It was a homemade certificate written in her own handwriting, declaring that I was officially responsible for the baby in case of anything. My name was written across the top, like I'd won an award. It had little hearts and stars doodled in the margins, like this was some kind of cherished, sentimental gesture. Tucked behind it was another note, scrawled hastily, that read, "Until we find a daycare, I know I can count on you during the day." I stood there, holding the papers in my hands, completely speechless. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was surreal. After everything we'd gone through, the boundaries I had fought to enforce, the emotional manipulation, the nights of broken sleep, the constant burden of unspoken expectations, she was still trying to repackage her needs as a sweet, familial gesture. She was trying to assign me a role I never agreed to play, dress it up like it was an honor, and force it into my hands wrapped in pretty paper and emotional strings. It was manipulative, plain and simple. A last-ditch effort to create a bond that was really just another leash. She wasn't just refusing to accept my boundaries, she was attempting to rewrite them under the guise of love and trust. She was trying to guilt me into resuming the role of full-time, unpaid caregiver by disguising it as a heartfelt gift. It was so absurd I could almost admire the creativity, if it hadn't been so wildly inappropriate. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't get emotional. I simply told her, calmly and without room for argument, that I did not accept this title, and that this day was the final deadline. I reminded her of the conversation we had a week ago, the letter I left on the kitchen table, the timeline I had given her with more generosity than I should have. I told her the lease was in my name, and it was no longer up for discussion, she had to move today, as agreed. That's when she refused to come out of the bedroom. She shut herself inside with the baby, locked the door, and said she was too overwhelmed to move. She started crying again, loudly and theatrically, as if hoping the noise alone would break my resolve. She said she had nowhere to go, that her partner was unreliable, that I was abandoning them. It was a last-ditch push to make me feel like the bad guy, to drag me back into a role I never consented to fill. I didn't let it happen. I sat on the couch for 10 minutes, took a few deep breaths, and then I did something I never thought I'd have to do to my own sister. I called the landlord. The apartment was rented in my name. My sister was not on the lease. She had no legal right to be there. I explained the situation calmly, factually, without getting emotional. I told the landlord that a guest had overstayed her welcome, was refusing to leave, and that I needed assistance enforcing the terms of my lease. The landlord, to their credit, was professional and prompt. They came over within a couple of hours with a copy of the lease and made it clear, kindly but firmly, that if she didn't vacate voluntarily, the next step would be law enforcement. That finally shook her. She emerged, red-faced and angry, muttering under her breath about betrayal and how family doesn't do this to each other. But she started packing. She moved slowly, making as much noise as possible. She slammed drawers. She dropped things loudly. She kept repeating, "I guess this is what I get for trusting you," as if I had somehow violated her trust, when all I had done was refuse to be manipulated any further. She packed everything, the baby's clothes, her own belongings, and yes, even the absurd certificate and the ridiculous bow-wrapped box. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't thank me for the weeks of support, the sleepless nights, the meals, the emotional labor. She left in a cloud of resentment, carrying not just her bags but a narrative in which she had been wronged. And I let her leave. I didn't chase after her. I didn't try to explain again. I didn't second-guess myself. I had done everything I could, given more than I had, and endured far longer than anyone should be expected to. She made her choices. I made mine. In a few hours she left with everything, including the gift. Update 3. It had only been 2 days since she left. 2 days of quiet. 2 days of coming home to an apartment that no longer felt like it was slowly shrinking around me. 2 days of making coffee without baby bottles cluttering the counter, 2 days of sleeping through the night without the sound of crying or pacing or the endless tug of guilt. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was surviving someone else's life, I was just living mine. But I should have known it wasn't over. It was a Sunday afternoon. I had just returned from the grocery store, arms full of food that, for once, I could pick without considering an infant's needs. I was halfway through putting the bags away when I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it, and there she was. My sister. She was holding the baby on one hip and gave me this practiced, casual smile. She said she had forgotten a few things and needed to grab them. I hesitated, but I'm not a monster. I stepped aside and let her in. She walked past me like she had never left. Within half an hour, she was back in the bedroom. Her toiletry bag had somehow reappeared in the bathroom. Bottles lined the sink. Her coat was draped over the chair. The baby, wrapped in the same blanket I had seen 100 times, was napping in his old spot on the couch. She poured herself a glass of water and started talking about how she hadn't been able to sleep because her boyfriend had been aggressive and she didn't feel safe. She didn't offer any details. No incidents, no marks, no police involvement. Just a vague declaration, enough to dangle concern without accountability. When I asked what she needed and suggested helping her find a women's shelter or temporary housing program, she refused flat out. She said she couldn't handle being around strangers. She said shelters were too loud, too unsafe for a baby. She said she needed family. She needed me. Then she pulled out her phone, took a selfie with the baby on my couch, and uploaded it to social media with the caption, "Thank you sister for always taking me back, even when I make mistakes." Now the baby and I are at home. I stared at the post in stunned silence. There it was. Proof that this wasn't desperation, it was strategy. She didn't just need space. She needed permission. She needed validation. She needed a way to reframe her intrusion into something noble, something sweet, something forgivable. She was spinning a narrative where I was the nurturing, ever-giving sister who never said no, even when she deserved it. And worse, it worked. The comments were already rolling in. People were liking the post, leaving hearts and prayer hands, calling me an angel, saying things like, "Family always sticks together." They didn't know the truth. They didn't see the sleepless nights, the refusal to leave, the gaslighting, the mental manipulation wrapped in pastel-colored bows. I didn't say anything to her that night. I needed time to process. I slept with one eye open, heart racing, waiting for the next manipulation. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I left for work at my usual time, even though I had no intention of going in. I needed space. I needed backup. I returned an hour later and rang the doorbell to my own apartment. She didn't open the door. I waited, rang again. Nothing. I called her cell, straight to voicemail. I knocked. I texted. I even tried the key, which she had apparently swapped out sometime during her original stay. That's when it hit me, she had locked me out of my own apartment. She was barricading herself inside as if she lived there, as if she belonged there more than I did. I was standing in the hallway, holding my own work bag, completely and utterly stunned. I didn't waste time. I called the police. When they arrived, I showed them the lease agreement with my name clearly printed at the top. I showed them the eviction letter I had written her the previous week. I played the intercom footage from my phone, which showed her entering uninvited with a stroller and a bag. I pulled up the social media post she had made the day before, which clearly stated that she was back home. I even scrolled through our text messages, the weeks of her asking for just one more night, the repeated confirmations that this was temporary. The officers were calm and professional. They knocked, explained the situation, and requested that she open the door. It took her a long time, but eventually, she did. The look on her face when she saw me standing there behind the officers was something I'll never forget: anger, betrayal, and above all, disbelief. She really thought she could walk back into my life and stay there by sheer force of guilt and sentimentality. She argued, of course. She cried. She told the officers she had nowhere else to go, that I was her only family, that she had a baby. But they didn't budge. They explained the legality, told her this wasn't a domestic dispute, this was a property issue, and she had no legal claim to the apartment. She tried to argue that I had welcomed her back, citing the post she had written, as if Instagram carried more legal weight than a signed lease agreement. Eventually, she gave in. With gritted teeth and a scowl that could freeze fire, she packed her things again. She was slower this time, deliberately taking her time, making a show of every movement. She sighed. She muttered. She slammed cabinet doors. She took the baby off the couch with an exaggerated tenderness, whispering things just loud enough for me to hear, comments about how the world was cruel, how some people just don't understand what family means, and then, finally, she handed over the keys. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just a last, lingering glare and a dramatic, over-the-shoulder declaration about how she hoped I never needed help the way she did. And then she was gone. For good this time. I stood in the doorway long after she left, listening to the sound of my own breathing. The apartment was quiet again. No bottles, no crying, no cooing, no passive-aggressive sighs. Just silence. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, it feels clean. I took 2 weeks off work. Not because I was mourning, but because I needed to reset everything. My routines. My sleep. My mental health. I opened the windows and let the apartment breathe. I changed the locks. I boxed up the few things she had left behind and donated them. I sat on my couch and drank coffee without a crying baby in the background, without the sound of someone sighing in the bathroom or slamming drawers in protest. I let myself remember what normal looked like. What my life looked like when it was mine. And in those 2 weeks, I came to understand something I had never fully grasped before: love for family does not mean automatic consent to self-sacrifice. It is not my job to save someone who refuses to take responsibility. It is not my duty to be consumed just because we share blood. There is a difference between help and replace, and now I know which one I was being asked to do. Now I live alone. The apartment is quiet. And for the first time in a long time, so is my mind.